Hey guys, welcome back to The Anime Collector. This week I want to talk to you about the concept of never judging a book by its cover. Okay, and that's this week's tip, is never judge by appearance. Now, that's actually the whole tip, but in order to quantify it a little bit, in order to sort of give you guys some weight to this concept, I want to explain how in the past I have judged certain animes by their appearance and either been very pleasantly surprised when I watched them or utterly disappointed. Okay? Now, in order to do this, I sort of have to explain how I purchase anime, because as you guys know, I exclusively watch shows that I own. So I have to sort of explain to you guys how I determine whether or not a show is worth picking up so that I can watch it. So the number one way that I usually do this is, as soon as I finish watching a disc, or even sometimes right as I put it in the DVD player, I will check to see if there's any trailers. And if they have a trailer for a show, even if I've already seen the trailer for the show, if it's a show that I do not own, more often than not, I will watch it. Okay? Especially if it's a show I've never heard of, and it's my first sort of experience being exposed to it, I will always watch it because that's how I learn what else is out there. Okay? Now, the number two way that I pick things up is if I ever find an anime in a store that I've absolutely never heard of, especially when it looks old, like when it looks like it's an older show, if I have never even heard of it, I will almost always pick it up, okay? I love obscure anime that nobody's ever heard of. That's some of my favorite stuff to own. It's not always my favorite animes in general, but it's some of the stuff that I like to have in my collection, you know, so that as people go through it, they see a lot of things they've never heard of before. That's just something I like to collect. Now, so that's number two. Number three is if I happen to know that a show is wildly popular, like it has a really big fan base. Like, I simply cannot help but see fan art, or I just hear people talking about it all the time if I'm in line at Anime Expo, or people are dressed up as those characters all the time, and I just happen to know what the show is for one reason or another, and it seems incredibly popular. If I find that show for sale, used or at a good price, I will definitely pick it up because it has a pretty huge following behind it. And another reason I might pick something up, and I'm going to stop numbering these just because they're actually not really in any particular order, would be, let's say, if it's based on a manga that I really like, or if it's by a studio that I have a lot of respect for, like Studio Ghibli. Or let's say if a friend of mine recommended it, especially if it's somebody that knows me really well, who says, hey, I know you really liked this show, it's very similar, you're going to really like this, or you're going to like it for this reason, or this reason, or this reason. And another reason could be because simply by the appearance of it, you know. If it has a very interesting piece of artwork on the cover, because I'm an artist and because I'm a designer, I've been known to buy things just because I liked the typography of it. You know, I thought that the presentation of the box set was very clever and interesting, and I picked it up merely for that reason, and I honestly didn't care if the show was any good, you know? Now, the last thing I can think of off the top of my head for why I might pick something up is based on a concept where familiarity breeds fondness, okay? This is based on a phenomenon where people express an undue fondness for things merely because they're familiar with them. This is actually why corporations spend so much money on advertising campaigns, because they want to get the name, the logo, the slogan. They want to surround you with it in ways you don't even realize. They want to put it in the magazine that the person on the bus next to you is reading. They want to have it everywhere so that subconsciously you start becoming familiar with it. Okay? So let's say that if it's for a company that's selling headphones, next time you need to buy headphones, if you've become sort of surrounded and familiar with this brand of headphone, you might choose to buy that headphone over another headphone. Okay, this is why they spend so much money on advertising campaigns. Another example would be like if you drive to work every day and you always seem to get stopped at the same light, and while you're stopped there, you end up looking over at a restaurant that's on the corner, and the restaurant has a really cool or clever name, or it's got a logo that's just really visually interesting or clever to you, and you always find yourself looking at it, thinking about that place, but you've never actually taken the time to actually go in and eat there. Let's say that you go to work and one of your coworkers comes up to you and says, hey man, do you want to go grab a bite to eat for lunch? And you're like, yeah, sure. And they say, cool, would you like to go here, or would you like to go here? And let's say that you've never heard of this place, you've never been there, and this is the place that you've never been to, but you know of it. It's the place with the cool logo or the interesting name. You're going to choose this place, okay? That's the concept in action. This also happens between human beings, okay? It's this idea that the more often you see certain people, especially when you're single, the more attractive they become to you, okay? And the reason I bring this up is because when I used to collect in the early days, I would go through literally everything in the big selection. I don't necessarily have to do it as much anymore because the selections are so much smaller. It's just sort of not the same. But let's say that I'd be at Suncoast Video. I would pull every single anime DVD out in the anime section, and I would look at the cover. Okay, and I would do it every single time I went there. You know, when I would be spending an hour shopping for anime, even if I only bought one thing, I would go through everything. You know, that's sort of how I wasted my time in high school. You know, and the more I saw certain shows, the more I felt like I wanted to pick them up, okay? And it's almost based now in a sort of nostalgia where if I see that show for sale used today, and it's one of those shows that I remember seeing over and over and over again, I'll pick it up out of the nostalgia for it, out of that familiarity and that fondness that I've had for that show, okay? Now, let me explain to you guys how I have judged certain shows in the past based on these sort of parameters of becoming aware of them, okay? So let's start with trailers. There was a trend I noticed going on for a while where Geneon, I'm not sure that they were actually recreating the trailers from scratch, but something about the trailers on a lot of the DVDs I was getting from them, it seemed like the shows were being presented as almost like American movies or Hollywoodized sort of trailers. And it kind of bugged me, and I really didn't appreciate it, you know, and I really sort of bastardized those shows for a while. And some of the shows I can think of off the top of my head that seemed like they were doing this were Licensed by Royalty, Master Keaton, and Lupin the Third. Okay? Now, I had seen Lupin the Third on Adult Swim many years ago, and I was actually in the process of collecting it. And one day it just sort of clicked where I was like, you know what? Believe it or not, Lupin the Third is my all-time favorite anime. And I'm going out of my way to collect all of the DVDs, even though this is one of the shows that has a sort of Hollywoodized American feeling to it in the trailer that I have, for whatever reason, been judging other shows for. So for literally no reason, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to start collecting every show that seems like it has this Americanized trailer. Just for no reason. I'm just going to start doing it. It'll be a hoot. And I bought, among other shows that were doing this, I bought Licensed by Royalty, and I bought Master Keaton. Okay? Master Keaton is my second all-time favorite show, right behind Lupin the Third. And Licensed by Royalty is right up there as well. Okay? It's not one of my all-time favorites, but I really dug that show. And that's when I sort of, you know, you can't judge things based on the trailers. Now, to give you another example about trailers, when I saw the trailer for Desert Punk, it did not seem like the type of show I would like, okay? Funimation, or rather, again, it's not necessarily true that they were changing the trailer, but whatever the trailer was promoting seemed to be a different demographic or a different sort of audience than I felt I fell under, you know? It seemed to be a lot of eye candy, and it seemed to be sort of perverted, and it's just not really what I get into anime for, you know? And I really thought I was never going to pick it up, never going to watch it, okay? But a friend of mine in college brought Desert Punk in one day in the computer lab where I was working, and he started playing it on the computer next to me, and he wanted me to watch it with him, okay? And because I had started watching it, I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to get it now, even if I don't like the show. That was sort of the mindset I went into it. This show is freaking hilarious, okay? Definitely worth picking up, okay? Absolutely. The elements shown off in the trailer are definitely there, but they are no reason to condemn the show. I mean, it was actually one of the funniest experiences I've ever had watching an anime, you know? Now, as far as picking things up because of the artwork on them, back in the day, in my very, very early days of collecting, I picked up a show in bootleg form called Twilight of the Dark Master, because the cover was really interesting to me. You know, I thought it was a really cool artistic sort of design on it. And I had never heard of the show before. And I actually didn't even realize that it came out in America, but eventually I bought the American release as well, which has the same cover on it. Okay? And I've had all sorts of experiences like that where I pick things up based solely on their appearance, such as with Twilight of the Dark Master. And in this particular case, the show's not, outstanding, and it's not terrible. It's an experience that I'm glad I had, you know? And it's a show that I like having in my collection. Again, sometimes you buy things just because they look nice and you keep them in your collection. Now, you guys might remember in the David Dossie review, I mentioned that I really liked the typography of the title. And as I kept seeing it in the bargain bin on Right Stuf, something about the cover just really drew me in, you know? And one day I eventually picked it up because I needed to buy something in order to get me over that threshold to get free shipping. It's kind of similar to that scenario where you see that restaurant and it looks really nice and you kind of always want to go there, but you don't always usually have a reason to. And then when that reason arises, when somebody says, hey, you want to go get lunch, and they offer to take you there, that's, you know, sort of the thing that you're like, yeah, sure, let's go. You know, it's kind of like the same experience with David Dossie. And if you've seen my review, David Dossie was a very interesting experience as well, similar to sort of Twilight of the Dark Masters, where I wasn't necessarily knowing what to expect with it, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. But another time that I had a similar experience to this, where it's sort of a combination of picking something up because of the appearance and also somewhat because of the familiarity breeding fondness. My friend Dan and I, we both picked up a show at around the same time on Right Stuf called Erda the Third Reich, which has a really cool cover, and it just, something about it is really, it draws you in. It looks interesting, it sounds interesting. This show is terrible, though. It's one of the worst animes I've ever seen. This is one of those things where it's like, here's the average of a show, and then like you're going up here, and this is where the show's getting really bad, and then it hits this weird threshold where all of a sudden it's so bad that it's good. This show goes past that threshold into a territory that's so bad you should just not even see it. I mean, it's awful. And I guess I'm especially betrayed by it because I expected it to be good. Or I expected to like it. It sounded interesting, it looked interesting, and I didn't even really realize it was going to be cel-shaded. It's so bad, I can't even describe how bad it is. Another quick reference to something that was very similar to like this was another show I got off of Right Stuf, similar to how I got David Dossie and Erda the Third Reich, called Elsia. And the cover for this thing, which I kept seeing in the bargain bin, looked, it reminded me of the 12 Kingdoms. And eventually, I went out of my way to pick it up, you know? And this show is bad in ways I can't describe. It's just, like, the character design that looks so cool on the cover of the DVD just doesn't hold up at all in the animation. Something about it is just, all of the things that made it look good now make it look bad. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just another really bad experience. And I actually warned Dan. He kept going through my collection and pulling it out and looking at it because he had also seen it for sale on Right Stuf, and he's like, you know, I've been thinking about getting this, and I'm like, don't, no way, don't even do it. And eventually he actually broke down and bought it as well, and he's like, you know, I should have listened to you. That was a terrible decision to buy it just because of the cover. And, you know, this stuff just sort of happens, and it's okay, I mean, especially with Erda the Third Reich and Elsia, because they're very short. You know, they're not, you know, an entire 2,000 episode show that you're stuck sitting through even though you hate it. Now, to give you guys a couple of quick examples about how I might have purchased something because of its association with another show, I picked up Angel Links because it's a spin-off of Outlaw Star, you know, and I really like Outlaw Star. You know, Angel Links is not bad. It's not nearly as good as Outlaw Star, but I definitely picked it up because of its affiliation, especially since the Angel Links characters actually cameo in Outlaw Star in an episode. Now, I picked up Puni Puni Poemi because it's sort of a spin-off from Excel Saga, okay? And the Puni Puni Poemi character is also cameoed in Excel Saga with a different design. It was an unfinished rendition, like a prototype of her design. I also picked up Nerima Daikon Brothers because it's also by Shinichi Watanabe, who created Excel Saga and Puni Puni Poemi. And I went into it sort of expecting it to be the same sort of concept. You know what I mean? And it's a different show, for sure. It's definitely a different show. It's very musical, and something about Shinichi Watanabe's work is that, I actually specifically watch it in Japanese, but just as a little tidbit, his work is very humorous, even when you're watching it in English, but if you are watching it in English, you're missing an enormous amount of the actual humor. He is very talented at writing specifically for the Japanese language. There's all sorts of tongue twisters and word puns, you know, and play on the entire sentence structure of how to speak in Japanese, that if you don't speak Japanese, it's all going to be lost on you. You know, it's so much funnier, so much more enjoyable in Japanese if you speak it. And when I picked up Nerima Daikon Brothers, I was hoping that it would be wacky and off the scale like Excel Saga and Puni Puni Poemi, and unfortunately it was a different brand of show. You know what I mean? I don't hate that I've seen it or that I have it. I don't necessarily feel that betrayed, because I do sort of try to go into the mindset of not letting anything get overhyped. But that's just sort of, you know, one of those experiences. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you guys about before we wrap this video up is an experience I had, again, with that sort of familiarity breeds fondness, but also sort of judging something based on other shows that seem similar to it. I actually just started watching Armored Trooper Votoms, and I never expected to actually like this show, okay? I picked this up at Anime Expo, I believe last year, and I got it simply because it's an anime classic that I've always seen for sale many times growing up and in my collecting sort of career, but I never end up picking it up because it just doesn't seem like my kind of show, okay? I'm actually not a really big fan of mech shows. There are a couple that I really like where the stories, I like it when the story revolves around the characters and not just an excuse to have giant robots fighting each other. For instance, I really like Full Metal Panic and Escaflowne, but a lot of times I can't find myself really getting into the story, you know, if it's just a bunch of robots fighting each other. And I picked this show up just simply because I found it for a decent price, and it was a box set that I'd never seen before, that I hadn't recognized in the past, and it looked like it was much older than the version I was used to seeing, so I'm like, yeah, I'll definitely get it. It looks like a collectible. Turns out it's not as rare as the one I was used to seeing, but the bottom line is that this show is outstanding. This show has like rekindled my love for anime in a way that a show has not been able to in a very long time. In fact, since I started doing the tip videos, you know, I made that video about how to budget your time, and after making that video, I've started to work really hard to carve out more time in my day, every day of the week, to sit down and get some anime in there. I try to at least watch one episode a night, and I'm finding that because of how much I like this show, I'm actually looking for more ways to carve out more time. You know, like it's the first time in a while that I've actually seen a show that I liked so much that I actively tried to do other tasks faster to save time and be able to get back to seeing more episodes during the day. So that's basically the tip this week. I just want to really encourage you guys not to judge things by their cover or by their trailer. And in fact, I should mention that I mentioned that Lupin the Third and Master Keaton and Licensed by Royalty all had a trailer that was sort of Americanized. I should mention that the Lupin trailer is to a much lesser extent. Anyway, that's this week's tip, so let's go ahead and pop the book up on the shelf. And I'm going to keep sending you guys over to the Super Dynacon channel until we finish the next review. I've actually been working on this review for about 5 months now, doing all sorts of research and whatnot for it. The recording process has taken about 6 to 8 weeks, and I've probably got another 2 or 3 left before I'm done, and then uploading is going to be a beast because of how long this monster is. But I'll see you guys next week for another tip for sure.